Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski is in Beijing this week at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two leaders are discussing a range of topics, including investment, agriculture, and tourism. We begin our coverage with CCTV's Hona in Beijing. And Hona, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski is making China his first official stop as the newly elected president of Peru. Tell us about that relationship between China and Peru.
Right, and this is Kuczynski's first foreign trip since taking office in July. President Xi Jinping welcomed him to the country and urged for cooperation in modern agriculture, new energy, and green economy, as well as in the traditional sectors of mining, energy, and infrastructure. He said he appreciated that President Kuczynski has chosen China to be his first foreign destination after taking office. Actually, high-level visits between China and its trade partners in Latin America are getting more frequent in recent years. Leaders from Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, and Chile have all made China the first foreign trip destination. And this time, Peru is seeking to attract more Chinese investment in mining, fishing, and infrastructure, as well as more Chinese visitors. A bilateral free trade agreement between China and Peru took effect in 2010. And China is now Peru's second largest trading partner, its largest export market, and its second largest source of imports. And mining has become an important pillar of trade between the two countries. The sector was worth $15.5 billion in 2015. And Peru is considered the leading location for Chinese mineral investment in Latin America. And Chinese firms hold around 30% of the country's total mining investment portfolio. Chinese firms also have an important presence in Peru's hydrocarbons and commercial fishing sectors. In 2014, China also became Peru's main supplier of capital goods and leading investor. And by May this year, China's investment in Peru hit $20.7 billion. Anna.
Now, China has invested heavily in infrastructure in South America. What agreements can we expect to be reached this week between China and Peru?
Well, actually, during the bilateral meeting, President Xi Jinping said China will support Peru in hosting the upcoming APEC economic leaders meeting. China is ready to work with the Latin American country to make greater contributions to the Asia-Pacific and global economic growth through the APEC meeting. Well, during the talks, President Xi Jinping called on both countries to continue high-level contact and expand exchanges between governments, political parties, legislatures, and local levels to consolidate the political foundation for their long-term friendship. And as for global issues, the Chinese president hopes both sides will maintain coordination and collaboration in global economic governance, climate change, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in order to safeguard the common interests of developing countries.
All right, thank you. That's CCTV's Hona reporting from Beijing. Joining us now from Lima is Diego Macera. He's the CEO of the Peruvian Institute of Economics. From Paris, we're joined by Pepe Escobar. He's an independent geopolitical analyst and author. Here with us in Washington is Arturo Sarukhan. He served as the Mexico ambassador to the United States from 2007 to 2013 and is currently a non-resident senior fellow of foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. From Beijing, we're joined by Jiang Shixue. He's the vice president of the Chinese Association of Latin American Studies. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's start in Beijing with Jiang Shixue. And Jiang Shixue, China has pledged to invest $250 billion in Latin America over the next 10 years. What makes this such an attractive region, such an attractive investment for China?
Well, as you know, that Peru and the other countries in the region are well endowed with natural resources. And China itself has lots of this kind of natural resources. But in per capita terms, China is quite poor. And in order to maintain its rapid economic growth, so China needs these kind of resources from countries outside of Asia, in Latin America, Africa, and Central Asia. And secondly, China wants to make investment. As you know, in China, we have a strategy, which is called the Going Global strategy, encouraging Chinese investment to make investments everywhere. So in the future, or even nowadays, we can say that wherever there is sunshine, there are Chinese investment. So I would say that that will be a win-win situation for both Latin America and China.
Diego, let's look at Peru. Within hours of winning the presidential election in June, President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, also known as PPK, announced plans to visit China. Why is China so important to Peru?
Well, I think the answer here is threefold. On the one hand, we need the Chinese investment, as the colleague in Beijing was saying. It's a win-win situation for all. We need Chinese investment not only in mining and energy, which is being developed right now, but also in other industries. That's on the one hand. And second, also we need to foster the trade with China. Right now, China is our main trading partner. It has surpassed the U.S. in recent years. And we need to, however, we need to sell more differentiated products, not only minerals, such as copper and silver that we're selling now, also quinoa, shrimps, and other type of non-traditional exports. And also the third part is we need to foster the tourism with Chinese tourists coming here. Last year, we had barely 20,000 tourists out of the 100 million tourists that are coming out of China every year. We feel Peru and also the region has a lot of potential to increment the number of Chinese tourists coming.
Right, and Ambassador Sarukhan, when it comes to Mexico, we had the Chinese President Xi Jinping. He traveled to Mexico in June of 2013. There was a whole series of agreements signed in the energy, trade, and education sectors. How has that relationship evolved over the years?
Well, I think it was very telling that he went very early on during his tenure as president, and that I think set in motion a number of initiatives that have now started to give much more substance and depth to the Mexico-China relationship. Remember, first of all, that Mexico now has China as its second largest trading partner, and it's the third largest destination of Mexican exports. And, you know, as most things in life, there isn't one size fits all for China-Latin American relations, and whereas most of the South American countries that have very intense trade relationships with China, basically commodities, the Mexico-China trade flows are very different. Manufactured, autos, auto parts, the fresh produce is starting to increase exponentially, and some relatively interesting investments and Chinese footprint in Mexican energy as a result of the Mexican decision to open up its energy sector to foreign or domestic private investment.
Right. Pepe, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang went to Latin America. He pledged $53 billion worth of deals in Brazil, mainly for commodities and infrastructure. How has Brazil benefited from Chinese investment?
It's a long-term process, in fact. Brazil, for the moment, is very cheap. Like, I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, the real was 4-1 related to the dollar. Now it's around 3.3. It's still very cheap. So buying Brazilian assets is a very good idea, and buying Brazilian companies as well. Part of the privatization campaign of this extremely complex new Temer government, which is, by the way, is not representative of the majority of Brazilian population. But one thing that the Temer government must do is to cultivate very good relations with China. That's because of the BRICS, of course. They work together on the new development bank. They work together on the drive towards trading their own currencies, the drive towards a multipolar world. And of course, China is #1 trade partner of Brazil for a few years now. That's a constant all over Latin America, in fact. It used to be the US a few years ago. But Chinese interests are very specific industries. IT, hydroelectric power, minerals, the steel industry, railways, building railways, of course. And this ties in with Brazil's key problem, which is the appalling state of Brazilian infrastructure. And the Chinese have all that it takes to help Brazil in the short, medium, to long term, in fact. So this is the benefits, as you ask, are going to be seen in the long run.
Now, Jiang Shixue in Beijing, China is behind the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. What role will it play in developing countries, let's say like Peru?
Well, can I just add one point about tourism? Diego in Lima, I mentioned that Peru wants to attract more Chinese tourists, and that would be a very nice idea. But let me tell you that we need to deal with some of the problems. First, there are only 3 the so-called direct flights from China to Mexico, Brazil, something like that. So we need to have more direct air flights. And secondly, Peru need to compete with countries in other South America and even Caribbean countries to attract more Chinese investments. Okay, so as for the AIIB, as you know that AIIB can make investments not only in Asia but also in Africa and South America. So I would say that China will be very happy to guide the so-called AIIB bank to make more investments in the such sectors as infrastructure and other kinds of things. And if these kind of railroads, transportation can be improved, so that will be more comfortable for South American countries to sell more products to China. And I know that it's not easy so far for a truck to shift soybeans and the minerals from inland to the port city. So I hope that there will be another win-win situation for both Latin America and China.
Right, and Diego, speaking of becoming more competitive, you have a country like Peru, so it's exporting its commodities, its raw commodities, things like you've pointed out, silver, copper, to a country like China. Now, President Kuczynski is talking about not just exporting those commodities, but of refining them, processing them. How significant is that?
I'm kind of skeptical, really, about the added value that refining commodities make. Right now, I believe there's a surplus of refineries around the world and even in China that can process the commodities that we sell for a cheaper price, and they are already established. So I am a little skeptical of the added value that that could bring. However, that's not to say that China can only buy commodities from us. Recently, the blueberry market has just opened. In general, the berry market is a good market for us. Chocolate, also seafood. So we have a lot of non-traditional products that have a great potential to enter the Chinese market, aside from commodities or not so value-added commodities, processed commodities.
Ambassador, the Chinese president, during his visit to Mexico in 2013, addressed the Mexican Congress. Let's take a listen to some of what he said.
In today's world, Latin America and Asia are 2 dynamic regions that have a great potential for their future development. China and Mexico must be part actively of their process to stabilize the world economy and unite their efforts to help the global recovery and the sustainable development.
So has this relationship got a lot closer since that visit?
Yeah, I think the political muscle tone of China-Mexico relations has greatly improved. I think that this visit provided sort of a blank canvas for both countries to rethink not only their trade and economic relationship, which is relevant, probably not as relevant based that it's not commodity driven like South America, but certainly very relevant because, as you know well, and as we've discussed before here in the program, North America has one unique asset which you basically don't see elsewhere around the world, which is that Mexico, Canada, and the United States have developed integrated joint supply chains and production platforms. So that as China looks at the hemisphere, looks at its economic relationships with even the United States, Mexico's geostrategic position even, and its place within NAFTA, I think gives it a very unique place. I also believe that Mexico is more than just another brick in the wall. What I'm trying to say is that, yes, the BRICS have played an important role in rethinking some of these international governance structures, but, you know, Mexico is a G20 member, is a member of the G20, and Mexico and China, as a result of this visit, have started talking about other multilateral issues. The Chinese-Mexican collaboration, when Mexico hosted the COP environmental meeting, COP16, was key in delivering the groundbreaking results there. So you're starting to see how this economic relationship is also morphing into a much more substantive political and global conversation.
And Pepe, that G20 summit, of course, China hosted that summit in Hangzhou. In an article you wrote, you said that China has set a geo-economic path for the future. Explain that to us.
It's all about connectivity. And it's all about One Belt, One Road, the new Silk Road. We can say that what started as the Go West campaign in China, with the new Silk Roads, it involves not only Eurasian integration, but it has extrapolated to Africa and Latin America as well. So we can see new Silk Roads being built by China or with Chinese input in Africa and in Latin America as well. The best example in South America would be something that has been discussed in Brazil for decades, but nothing was done about it, which is the Atlantic Pacific Railway. It's absolutely inadmissible that it's not there yet, but that tells you the extent of the infrastructure problem in Brazil. And it will take probably a Chinese direct intervention, direct Chinese investment and Chinese companies directly involved in it for this to finally happen. So it is a sort of South American new Silk Road with direct Chinese input, which is a win-win situation, both for Brazil in terms of exports and China to facilitate Chinese imports of essential Brazilian products.